What is up, everybody? Happy early Thanksgiving to you all. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and it's Steelers week. Unfortunately, it's lost a little bit of luster, to say the least, with the state of the Bengals roster. Their starting quarterback is out for the season, yet not on IR, I don't think, as of this point. So we'll have to see exactly what happens there. I'm Anthony Cosenza, getting ready to fill up on some turkey and all kinds of good stuff tomorrow. He is John Sheeran. What's going on, buddy?
Well, we can't gloss over one of the more underrated holidays going on right now, Blackout Wednesday. If you are sober, obviously respect that probably smart life change. But I'm sure we got some listeners getting ready to partake in the festivities tonight. So shout out to all of you.
I remember, and this is me sounding like the old guy. I remember when I was in college and even a little after, it was the night before Thanksgiving, that was always kind of a rager. You go out and you go have some fun at a lot of different places, a lot of different bars. You see a lot of people come in town from either their college or they're coming back. If they moved out of state or something, moved out of the city, they're coming back to see their family, and so you get to kind of reconnect with a lot of people. So hopefully people are doing that. I'm too old for that kind of stuff now, John. I may just have one at home a little later and do that. But regardless, we're here to talk some Cincinnati Bengals. Hopefully all of you are gearing up for a fun holiday, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, or maybe even maybe you're doing a Friendsgiving afterward. I hope you have fun with all of that. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network, wherein you can get this show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. They just had Jeff Blake on this week, so that's pretty cool. A guy who knows a thing or two about backup quarterbacks and rising to stardom from that, right? Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk with Matt Minnick, and, of course, 3 and Out with the boys, Jason and Kevin. You, me, and the guys with Bengal Jim there, we're not taking the week off. No offense. Hey, the other guys, I get it. They got lives. They got families. They're going out of town. I get it. It's all good. I kid, of course. And, of course, if you like what we do on the video side of things, you can click the show icon underneath John's side of the screen there by the SB Nation icon. Click our Orange and Black Insider show icon to subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when new content is available, when we go live, all that kind of stuff. Of course, if you like what we do, give us a thumbs up on the video, and you got to give a thumbs up as well to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. You can get all kinds of stories, our podcast streams, all that stuff are there as well. And I would be remiss, aside from going to cincyjungle.com. Again, my guy John writing up all kinds of stuff. He's doing what's that Jim Carrey movie?
Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty, yeah, where remember when he's hammering away.
Yeah.
I picture you hammering away at A2ZSports.com, like old Bruce Almighty, hammering away the Bengals and AFC North content. Anyway, that being said, we put up a poll on the Bengals Twitter account, and it got some votes. It didn't get a ton, but it got some. But there was maybe a little controversy with it. And John, the poll question was, what is the outcome? Essentially, what is the outcome you would like to see the most from the Bengals at this point now that Burrow is done for the year? Now, obviously, we all would love Jake Browning to come in and, do the AJ McCarron and more type of thing, get him into and through the playoffs and say, wow, what a nice run. There's the Tom Brady type of thing or whatever other, thing you want to talk about with that. But that just, number one, it makes the question too easy. And number two, that seems to be the least likely scenario. No offense to Jake Browning, no offense to the Bengals. It just seems, Burrow's that important to this team. So I ask you, John, you have three options. The Cincinnati Bengals lose most or all of their games to get the highest draft pick possible. The Cincinnati Bengals sneak into a wild card berth but lose in the first round and don't go through, and get the lower draft pick, less premium pick, or somewhere in the middle where they get an okay draft pick. So there's pros and cons to each, and you got to weigh those. So I just wanted to ask that if you wanted me to play some devil's advocate this week for you.
It's a good question. Personally, the most fun option would obviously be if they win, not just from like a fan's perspective, but from a professional perspective. Covering losing sucks, and regardless of the context of the losing, even in 2020, I mean, just the difference between the two injuries. I think like 2020 after Burrow went down, the severity of that injury combined with how just bleak the team looked afterwards, because the team was already not very good. It's not a good time, not a good time for content. And it was kind of a struggle for, I think, for all of us in the industry, especially with how the season ended against the Ravens when they gave up like 500 yards on the ground. Not very fun. So if they were to pull off this, because it was already going to be a tall task with Burrow out there against the toughest remaining schedule in the NFL, it was already going to be a tall task with the starting quarterback. If they were to pull it off with a quarterback that many people were highly skeptical of entering this regular season based off of what he did in training camp in the preseason, if he were to completely flip that on its head and do a 180 and all of a sudden look like one of these uprising backup stories and command the team to 4 or 5 wins and get into the playoffs and hell even win a playoff game, like that would be a phenomenal story. And personally, like when your team is comprised the way it is now, where the veteran leaders are in place, like it's all established at this point. It doesn't like tanking is just kind of stupid, and it's stupid in general, but it's especially stupid when you have the core pieces in place. I feel like winning is never not a bad thing to do to maintain a winning culture within the organization, within the locker room, all that jazz. It just attracts more positivity, attracts free agents, the whole 9 yards, right? So, like the idea of like losing out, it's never going to be appealing. It might be inevitable because again, the quarterback just might not be it, and this is all just not to be worried about because that's probably not losing out entirely, but losing more games than winning is the more likely scenario, like you mentioned. So I feel like it's just a reality that you accept, and it's not even something where it's like, do they want to do that when at the end of the day they might not have a choice, because again, like Jake Browning, he can be decent in times, but I don't think anyone really expects more than like 4 wins out of this. So it's just like winning would be fun, and I think it would be like the coolest outcome. But like you said, like it's not even tanking on purpose. It's just probably what it's going to be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I didn't use the term tank, because I don't think these guys are going to go out there and they're going to play. And so initially I was kind of on the mindset of let's just kind of maybe not win many games at all, get the highest pick possible, get a more premium player, especially when the Bengals have had recent high picks. They've kind of hit on them. And that includes high picks in the second round too, and the third. I mean, you could go back to the 2020 draft and the 21 draft. I mean, when they had the high picks, they've hit on some big players to get them where they are today and where they have been the last couple of years. But as I sit here now, and obviously what you said was really resonating. There's also a lot of guys in this locker room that the Bengals invested heavily in free agency and or will become free agents this next year. And these are guys that were critical to their last couple of runs, and you would like to see them fight hard, win, maybe sneak into the playoffs, see what happens. The other thing with this, and I don't want to, obviously no Burrow, that's a big knock on this Bengals team right now, but I mean, you look around, I mean, the Eagles are very, very good, but the Chiefs the other night, man, I mean, they were dropping balls left and right. The weather was terrible, but it didn't affect the Eagles quite the same way as it did the Chiefs. We've seen the Chiefs, they lost the opener against Detroit. They've had some stumbles. They're very good, but they have vulnerabilities. you see the team the Bengals are set to play this week, getting 10 points scored is an absolute chore for them. So, and they play them twice. Then you've got the Browns who barely got past that mark with 13 points and a backup quarterback, their third starting quarterback this year. So, you look at it and you go, well, I mean, this is a tough schedule, obviously. 3 more AFC North games remain. You got the Chiefs. There's a lot of tough games on here, but there are teams that are still, even with Jake Browning, kind of winnable in some regards. So I still, for a variety of reasons, I guess the emotional part, the passionate part, and the fact to say, hey, this team, don't discredit what Joe does or doesn't mean to the franchise if they win without him. I still think that, man, if you're able to get or even get close to the playoffs, right? You're like, man, you're right there last week or two. I think that would go a long way in that locker room too. And it would mean a lot to the guys who may or may not be here next year because their contracts are expiring. It would mean a lot to a guy like Jamar Chase. And then you hit on a big point too, man. The impending free agents, the outside guys that may be attracted to come to Cincinnati, they would say, if for some reason Joe goes down, this entire ship doesn't go down, right? There's a deep enough team to still be competitive. If I get paid well here, this roster is pretty deep and we can do some things.
It would just be so fascinating because the Bengals have been completely dependent on high play from Burrow. It hasn't been a situation where they've been able to carry him if he doesn't have his best day. I think the best example that you could give would be like the Rams or the Seahawks. And that's when you had the defense playing out of its mind, but the defense has been so inconsistent that you can't consistently rely on that like you have been able to for the past couple of years. It would do a lot for the Zach Taylor narrative too. How is it completely just Burrow just doing his checks at the line and just the quality of his play that's carrying what play calling is going on within the structure of the offense and everything like that. If they're able to put up consistent offensive numbers with a backup quarterback, albeit with the full cast of characters and everything, it would go a long way for that and just how that whole discussion discourse would evolve as well. I think like going to the playoffs and losing, it seems like the most all for naught type of situation. If you get there, you would like to win. So to answer like your original question, that would be the least attractive of the three. But I think there is a point about every team out there still has its warts. And if this was a situation where Burrow is playing at his best, you like the Bengals pretty much against anyone that they go up against. Like there's never going to be a situation where you're thinking the Bengals have no chance of winning this game. And that was probably already the situation whenever you have Burrow playing good, but you saw him, kind of elevating himself in the past several weeks and month or so. And, even with the down game against Houston, you figure, it's just kind of a blip in the radar or whatever. So it is incredibly fascinating though, how the Bengals have kind of put themselves in the situation where the first 4 weeks when Burrow clearly wasn't himself, they had the opportunity to play Jake Browning and they stood by Burrow. They were very confident in him playing up to his standard, and clearly that wasn't going to be the case until he got healthy in October. And now you have Jake Browning out there saying that I don't want the offense to be limited around what I can and can't do. Brian Callahan has full confidence in him. You don't know if that's just coach speak or if it's what he truly believes. But if it is what he truly believes, Anthony, it's so interesting how they had the chance to play this guy and potentially get an extra win when they needed to earlier in the season, but they chose to go out there with Burrow on one leg and just hope for the best, which would indicate that they didn't trust Browning to do all this. And now you're kind of hearing the opposite. And now you're putting all of this on him to salvage what remains of the season. So if it's able to go down like that, if he's able to win enough games to keep them in the playoff conversation, it would be one of the best stories in the NFL. And I think that's something worth rooting for.
For sure. And look, Browning has been the backup guy for a couple of years here, and he's beat out. This year he beat out Simeon, who I think pretty much everybody thought was going to be, but when that signing happened, you're like, okay, there's the backup, right? That's just what it seemed like, and he outplayed him. Neither of them were really lighting it up per se in the preseason, but the thing that fascinates me, and I said this on our last episode, I've said it a number of times to everybody, is I'm really fascinated to see how Browning performs, not only with a week and a half's worth of playbook digestion, more snaps, more reps, all of that as the guy, but also throwing to stars and starters and playing with stars and starters, not having to run for his life behind a patchwork offensive line of guys that were either fringe roster guys or maybe not even in the league at this point or at some point. And then, of course, other wide receivers who are practice squad guys or not even with the Bengals anymore, that sort of thing. So he's instead throwing to one of the best wide receivers in the league in Jamar Chase. We don't know about T. Higgins, who sat out practice again this week, but Boyd, there's starters and there are star players that he's going to be playing with. I'm sure there's going to be rust, jitters, all kinds of stuff, but I mean, I think there's got to be at least a little bit of excitement when your backup quarterback, who has shown a little bit in the preseason, is now playing with the big cast of characters.
And he was doing that in practice during training camp, which I think is another factor here. That
Good point.
It's not comparable to other backups just kind of being thrown in there. It's just it's the reality, I guess, of being the backup for the Bengals in training camp, because Burrow's usually dealing with something, and hopefully that won't be the case next year. But that was something that he talked about in his presser, and how it's kind of added confidence, and that's going to be like it's not just the fact that there's a drop off probably in the accuracy and the velocity and all the other things that makes Burrow special, along with just the intangibles and everything and his overall knowledge of the offense and the scheme and everything. But it's the timing of, getting these routes down, getting these throws down as well. And if he's truly in a situation where I don't want any handcuffs on me, I want the entire offense at my disposal, like I am the starter in the first place, then if that's the case and there's no limitations, then he has to operate with the efficiency that Burrow has in order for this team to have any chance, which is why the likelihood of all this is pretty minimal. And especially right out the gate, when you have a good defense, or at least a good pass rush that the Steelers have, that can make even Joe Burrow's life pretty hard in the 2 times that they play him. So it's going to be so fascinating to see it, because this is not like a lot of backups kind of being thrown out there, but the pressure for him to perform is just so considerably higher than for most teams that are, like the Bengals are a good team, but so much of their success is dependent on the quarterback playing at a high level.
Yeah, they still have a playoff pulse. I mean, they're down the pecking order a bit, but I mean, you win a handful of games, you're going to be right in that conversation towards the end there, particularly when you're winning the AFC games. Oddly enough, a very kind of somewhat misquoted situation today, but one wherein the Minnesota Vikings are in this same boat, and they're pretty competitive at this point with Josh Dobbs, who came over in a trade halfway through the season here. So the Bengals are a little bit in a similar boat, if not even in better shape, as Jake Browning mentioned on a Bengals.com article, saying, this isn't me going to a completely new team, a new system, and then starting. This is me. I've been here for the past couple of years. I know the system. I know the terminology. I know the players. So I potentially things are lining up better for him than, say, a Josh Dobbs, who kind of went over to Minnesota and has had pretty decent success, not only just overall this year, but definitely with Minnesota coming over from Arizona. I want to bring this up, and I don't know, Kenyon, it's a fair point to bring up. I don't know how much we want to harbor on this, but there's been graphics and memes and all kinds of stuff being thrown out since the Burrow injury, and his quote, for those listening on the audio side, I'm sorry to say this, but I believe Joe is going to end up like Andrew Luck with the type of O-line that he has. However, I may be wrong, just my opinion. Now, the Bengals we talked about the offensive line. They've put a lot of capital in the offensive line. The hits and the sacks are still there at a lesser rate than they were at least in 21 when they made the Super Bowl, but they're there. But the similarity too, though, John, and I would say even more so Luck than Burrow, but their willingness to take hits, their willingness to get in there, run around, either in the pocket, out of the pocket, and throw the ball, or run around and run downfield and take a hit. So that's where a parallel is. I would say Luck even more. I remember seeing Luck duck his head down a lot of times running the ball. I mean, it's a career arc that is similar. we're only 4 years in here with Burrow, so I don't want to hit the panic button yet, but there's a litany of injuries here that are worrisome.
This conversation is just it's so much more complex than people give it credit for. I don't want to say it's a lazy comparison because there are parallels to it, and I don't fault anyone for doing that. People don't give enough credit to how much the game has changed in all facets. Part of it is defenses are just better. They're bigger, faster, stronger. They've evolved more than the average offensive lineman has. Quarterbacks in the way that they play have evolved too. And unfortunately, that evolution of watching guys like Mike Vick and Steve Young and Robert Griffin, I just throw out any of the quarterbacks that have inspired the best quarterbacks today. The guys who grew up playing Madden, scrambling around the pocket. Like the average quarterback, the average great quarterback now plays different than the average great quarterback of 15, 20 years ago. And I think over time, you will see a natural decline in longevity for even some of the great quarterbacks. It would be so impressive if a guy like Patrick Mahomes played as long as Tom Brady. The likelihood of that is just not likely at all, right? Because they just play differently. And Tom Brady was he was an anomaly in so many ways anyways. So I think with Burrow, obviously the laundry list of injuries is concerning. I think, though, that with Andrew Luck, what happened with him, it was such an anomaly too, because of a player of that magnitude retiring at such an early age because of the injuries. But I think with Burrow, he's not any different than some of these other quarterbacks because these guys are all taking more hits than their predecessors were. And I think you will see in the next 10, 15 years, maybe some other quarterbacks retiring at a little bit earlier age. And maybe those quarterbacks don't have these terrible offensive lines, but it's just the way that the game is kind of going. Quarterbacks are getting more and more banged up. We've seen it this year. 5, 6, 7 of them are out for the season because of either bad protection or just pretty bad luck. And with Burrow, it happened to be both. So like the whole Andrew Luck thing, it's going to be a critical point in NFL history, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where it's like, if it happens to another quarterback, it's like, it's not an indictment of just neglect from a franchise perspective, which it was with the Colts because they rarely ever address the offensive line, unlike what the Bengals have done in past years. I think it's just a bigger NFL problem than is a Bengals or Joe Burrow problem.
Yeah, and Luck's an outlier truly with what happened there. I mean, you're not seeing that left and right and just so that's the path now. I again, there are parallels, there are worries and comparisons where you go, but I think it's premature for that. And again, that would be the parallels exist because number 1 overall pick and the whole deal. But it's a little premature at this point. And again, we're not seeing a lot of examples like an Andrew Luck where they are seemingly in the prime of their career and they just say thanks but no thanks and walk away. And I don't really see, we discussed this I think last week a little bit too, I don't really see that. This is no knock on Andrew Luck, I'm just talking more about Joe Burrow. I don't really see that as much in Burrow's DNA in terms of I'm going to walk away early, I'm going to screw this, I'm done. I don't really see that. That's not an indictment on Andrew Luck's character. That's not an indictment on other players who have retired early. I don't really, from what I know of Joe Burrow, I just don't really see that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that too. It's like everything that we know about Burrow, and he doesn't put his personal life out there that much. He's just lived and breathed football his entire life, and he's talked a lot about getting hit as part of the game. And I think ultimately, like every player throughout their career gets hurt a lot more than we know. Obviously, when a player gets out for the rest of the year, it makes pretty big news. But there are injuries that we don't know about. There were injuries for Andrew Luck that we didn't know about that he probably played through and toughened out. I think the players who end up lasting are those who are committed to the recovery process and just the process in general. And there's just no indication that Burrow is ever going to lose that addiction to the process. He's got it pretty down pat at this point. Yep. I think that's just, he's just wired in a way where it's like you just know that he's kind of in this for the long haul. And if that ends up being not the case, then that's what it is, and you can chalk that up to the record book. But like it's just it's the easy statement to make, and it's almost like a coping mechanism maybe, but it's just too early. We don't know.
We don't know, but we do know a little bit of some news, etc., going into this week for the Bengals as they host the Steelers, coming off of this mini bye where they've been hit with a lot of bad news, but there have been some pieces of encouraging or good news on the injury front for the Bengals. We're obviously talking at this point about T. Higgins, Sam Hubbard, and Cam Taylor-Britt. Cam Taylor-Britt, per Ian Rappaport, was day to day, and then there's kind of some encouraging news, but it wasn't all the way. It didn't all the way come to fruition from what Zach Taylor had said earlier until now. What I mean by that, and this is from Olivia Ray, who covers the Cincinnati Bengals, and we wrote this up on Cincy Jungle. We're also going to show you the actual injury report. There's kind of some good news here with these guys, and this was as of this morning, Wednesday morning. And you see here Zach Taylor again, Olivia Ray from I think she's with WLWT. We will likely see T. Higgins, Sam Hubbard, and Cam Taylor-Britt at practice today. Well, that wasn't the case for Higgins. And then Chase Brown, who was, brought off of IR. I don't believe he's on the active roster yet, John, but said Chase Brown is, quote, feeling pretty good, and that he is, quote, encouraged with where he is at right now. So, and that is from Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer, relaying that on Twitter there. I will pin the stories in here so you can also follow those two reporters there for the great work they do for the team. But T. Higgins, John, did not practice on Wednesday. I know Hubbard did. He was out there, and did CTB? I got to re-review that there. A couple of them did not come to fruition there, but that doesn't mean, again, CTB was day to day. Higgins now dealing with this thing for the past couple of weeks, the hamstring thing. So here's the injury report. Will you walk us through it, my friendo?
Yeah, I got you. So yeah, like you said, T. Higgins suffered the hamstring injury it was practicing after the Bills game. So it was leading up to the Texans game.
Right.
Those are nagging. If he's not practicing today, he might be a game time decision. We don't know. It's probably too early. He may practice Thursday. He may not. We're no doctors. DJ Reader is sick right now. That's kind of going around, so he didn't practice either. Cam Taylor-Britt has led the NFL in receptions since week 5, and since week 5, he's been dealing with a quad injury. He kind of activated it against the Ravens on Thursday night. Love playing on short rest, so he didn't practice. Everyone else did, aside from Joe Burrow. Hey, Joe Burrow's listed on the injury report because he's dealing with an injury. I wonder if that's due diligence. Akeem Davis-Gaither limited again. Sam Hubbard limited with the ankle injury. He suffered that against the Bills. Andre Josephus, who suffered his knee injury against the Texans, missed the game against the Ravens. He was limited too. Chase Brown, who was cleared to practice, like you said, on Monday, was a full participant on Wednesday. If I were to guess, Chase Brown gets activated Saturday, and that corresponding move would be Joe Burrow going on IR.
Yeah, that's probably accurate. And then full practice from Irwin, Cam Sample, and Jonah Williams. And then on the Steelers side of things, no practice for George Pickens, who has a shin injury. Veteran rest for Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace, Minka Fitzpatrick did not practice with a hamstring issue. And then you've got a couple of other guys who went limited. And Cam Hayward also did not practice, limited. I think he had a groin injury earlier this year that kept him out for a number of games as well. So, but he has been back, and the Steelers are relatively healthy, but a couple of big names on here: Pickens, Fitzpatrick, and Hayward not practicing, but Peterson also on there. But Peterson was rest, as was Hayward. The other two Fitzpatrick and Pickens with respective injuries. So that's kind of the injury front going into this one, John. What is it that the Bengals need to do the most this week? I mean, is it going to be a lot of run game stuff? If your prediction comes true that Chase Brown comes in, gets activated, Burrow on IR, I mean, are we expecting to see a lot of Mixon and Brown with Browning under center?
Kind of seems like a game where there might be close to 60 total rushes combined from both sides.
Yeah.
Joe Mixon has had good games against the Steelers in the past. He didn't play in the second one last year. That was Samaje Perine having a 2-touchdown performance in the passing game. But it has mostly just been Mixon running the ball. That doesn't seem to be sustainable if they are to play deep into January in that scenario. They need a healthier rotation behind him. They don't seem to trust Chris Evans at all running the ball. Trevion Williams gets an opportunity here or there. Chase Brown would give you the most dynamicism and the best possible complement in terms of just the difference of attack compared to Mixon. But again, he's rushed the ball, 3 times this year? He's been out for the past 4 or 5 weeks. I don't think you give him 5-10 carries out the gate in his first game back. So I'm not sure if the game plan is going to be tremendously different. I think it's going to be dependent on how the game goes. Obviously, like anything does, maybe out of the gate they do go under center just because Jake Browning at least has experience, conducting some wide zone concepts. Like he's been practicing in the system for 2 years. He's seen the evolution of it with his own eyes. But I think his strength is not necessarily just to go in shotgun 95% of the time like you would with Burrow. So when you're under center and you can run more under center plays, you can try to stretch the defense out with some more wide zone concepts. Maybe that involves a bigger emphasis on the run game. But again, just because Chase Brown hasn't been practicing that much, and even in the times that he was practicing, that wasn't really part of the offense necessarily. So I would imagine Joe Mixon gets probably north of 15, 18 carries in this one, and they try to build some play action concepts off that as well.
I was just going to say, I don't think I expect a ton of play action, but I think I expect a healthy amount of play action. Much like the very first play when Browning came in, the play action off of boot and wrapped back around and threw the ball from that. I expect to see more of that because he's, maybe under center a little bit more, but also the Steelers are probably thinking, they're going to try and run the ball a bit more with their backs this week. And if the Bengals can utilize play action, if they could, I don't know how effective it'll be if and when they do run it, but if they are able to be successful with it, I think that's a big key. If you're able to be tricky enough on your play action plays, if you're able to fool people enough on those and, get into, it doesn't have to be these, gigantic passes downfield to Chase type of thing off of these. If you're able to kind of do some controlled passing off of that to sustain drives, hold on to the ball, get a field goal, and then, the occasional touchdown if need be. I mean, that could make this game pretty difficult for the Steelers who, if you are the Bengals and you are able to get even a decent lead, the Steelers are scrappy and they work at comebacks, but they're not really built well as a team to come back from, a decent lead, a big lead, anything like that, coming from behind like that.
Yeah, that conversation to me is like, what Steelers offense is going to be there? Because I think in an unprofessional sense, this might be the worst week to play the Steelers? Question mark. Just because you have Matt Canada who's gone like a year or two late than when he should have been. We've seen both of the NFL and the college level teams kind of get that boost that first week after a coordinator who was underwhelming or despised, or in this case, both, is out the door. You have a weird system going on with Pittsburgh because the quarterback's coach is the play caller, but the running backs coach is the new offensive coordinator. So it's kind of like a dual responsibility type thing. I'm sure both of them are going to have influence in what it is. Pickett is still Pickett, I think, is the best way that you can say that. Like, he's not a great quarterback by any means. He's had his moments. But I think in general, like, when you get that type of morale boost of like, thank God the shackles are off of this dreadful offense, your guys tend to play better. So I'm not expecting like a piss poor, terrible Steelers offense necessarily. I think they're going to play pretty inspired and pretty happy that a decision that has been made, Anthony, since before Pearl Harbor, a midseason firing of a Steelers important either head coach or coordinator hasn't happened since 1941, which is crazy to me. Yeah, the continuity, like people get on the Bengals for being too loyal. The Steelers are just built on continuity and loyalty. So for them to do that is such a major shockwave within that organization. I think it's going to inspire a lot of their players. But at the end of the day, it's still Kenny Pickett throwing the football. He's not very good at it. So like you said, if they end up being down by 10 or 14 points, usually how they get back in is with some defensive magic, right? And that's what TJ Watt has been known for, whether sacking or tipping balls or interceptions or anything like that. They're still capable of making the splash plays to put their offense in positions to maybe eke something out. So again, I'm very curious what the Steelers' offense is going to be. But if there was a time for the offense to really just put their foot on the gas and look like a completely different unit, it might be against the Bengals defense that's struggling.
The Steelers off. Now, I know the Cleveland Browns defense is performing better. I mean, when the Bengals defense is on, you could say, hey, it's a group that can kind of compete with a lot of the better defensive units in the league, especially with their defensive coordinator. It's been worse to, you could even say a lot worse this year than in years past, given the amount of yards and the points that they've given up in some of these games as well. But I understand in general, the Browns defense is performing at a higher level, and you could even say, across the board, better players than the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers offense last week had 34 passing yards at the half. 34. So I didn't bother to look up what he ended up with. It probably wasn't that much higher than that number, because quite honestly, as I watched, I kind of sort of watched that game. I didn't watch it all the way, but it was a pretty unwatchable offensive output, and that's saying something given the fact that we were just coming off of Burrow being out and a backup being thrown in the and the Bengals not really scoring a ton of points with their backup. So it can't get much worse. The question is, does the coordinator change prompt what you were saying, which is it's a likely scenario where, hey, it's the boost, it's energizing. I mean, we saw when Cleveland let go of Hugh Jackson and how everybody started playing that way a handful of years ago, again at the hands of the Bengals. But it's also a scenario where they could continue to tread water a little bit with their offensive performance, and then if Pickens doesn't go with the shin injury, that's a big weapon you lose, and you kind of become a little bit more one-dimensional, where it's your quarterback and your running backs running the football.
Right. So the Bengals defense is definitely going to be under, I think, not under the most pressure, but there's been a lot of scrutiny, obviously, with how the past couple weeks have gone. CJ Stroud lighting them up, getting down early to Baltimore and just having that game kind of collapse in front of them. Last year, like, it was Pickett's first start, and he started that game pretty dreadfully, but it ended up working out in Pittsburgh's favor at the end of that one, and even later in the season. It was a pretty high scoring game. When you had both Chase and Mixon out, the Bengals were still able to put up points, but it's a pretty good offensive performance from that offense too. So I truly don't. Again, I don't really know what to expect. I don't think the Bengals really know what to expect out of that offense, because Najee Harris running the ball has just not been a successful formula for them. Like, their offensive line.
Warren's a stud, though.
Warren is a stud, and he has to be respected, especially in the passing game. And I think last week, after some big plays, giving up on some screens to the Ravens and some short passes, that's going to be a point of emphasis too. I would probably imagine that he gets featured just as much, if not more, than Najee Harris at this point, just because of just how much of a boost that gives them. So yeah, it's a lot of unknowns in this game, and for an AFC North game, that's pretty rare.
Shades of Willie Parker, how the ascension of Jaylen Warren. Yeah. Robert Warwick doing the homework for us. Look at this stat line, John Sheeran. 15 of 28 for 106 from Kenny Pickett. Now, I don't want to scoff too much, because that could change this week. We don't know. Well, what's going on with the Bengals defense? I mean, what's tackling's been poor. You give them a little bit of a pass because I think everybody was shell shocked last week. I guess, right? And when Burrow left the game, I think they were leading, right? So, I mean, you give them a little bit of a pass where you go, okay, that game just you lose your quarterback and you're just kind of spiraled out of control a little bit. But I know they've had some injuries, but they're just not getting to the passer with other guys other than Trey Hendrickson. They're not tackling as well. I don't know. Is it simply is it every layer of the defense is just taking a step back, or is it largely those two safeties that they lost this offseason that has just been a real killer to that unit?
Yeah, I would say the linebackers are fine, but defensive line and secondaries are where the issues are. Everyone knows when DJ Reader and BJ Hill aren't on the field. They have the worst depth at defensive tackle. It's just not even close. Like Zach Carter has somehow regressed from last year when he couldn't find the ball. He's does not provide a lot of use in either phase. Joseph Asai was going to be so important to provide a pass rushing boost.
Yeah, man.
And the high ankle sprain clearly impacted the start of his season. He just hasn't really been able to find his footing. Cam Sample has been fine, but again, if Cam Sample is right now your second best edge outside of Hendrickson because you don't have Hubbard out there, it's a weakness. Miles Murphy, I think he's flashing some more, but the process with him still has ways to go. With the secondary though, like I think Dax Hill has been fine as an individual. Nick Scott and his missed tackles and his bad angles, it's been pretty critical. It's why Jordan Battle is essentially the starter now, as announced by Lou Anarumo. He's just a better tackler. He's just in position more. So many of the big plays, though, like it hasn't always been just CJ Stroud, bombing it down the field 30 yards a time, 8 times a game against the Ravens. Like they got really lucky with that phantom holding call that brought back the touchdown, albeit, it got balanced out by the phantom PI against DJ Turner. But there's just been too many big plays, and the interceptions from Ken Taylor Britt have helped. I think the overall play from DJ Turner has helped because Chidbe Wuzie has been up and down because he's been coming back from injury, but there's just been too much spottiness with the secondary. I don't know if it's a communication issue, but they're just out of position too often, and it might have just been too much turnover at that position.
Yeah, and youth. I mean, you've got a lot of new faces that have ascended to bigger roles maybe than originally thought. But I mean, I do, again, I still think the future is really bright with CTB. I think the future's bright with DJ Turner. I think the future's bright with Dax Hill. We'll see what Jordan Bat. I think we all kind of like what he has shown for here and there. So the future's pretty bright there. It might have just been, a little bit of a buzzsaw of a lot of inexperience and a lot of youth, which we knew was going to be the case. And then, of course, the pass rush depth, like you said, there's just, what I talk about this so much, and I hate to keep bringing it up. But part of the deal that was so effective about 21 was when you had Larry O in there, you could switch Larry O out and bring BJ Hill in and vice versa. And those guys just interchanged and brought a lot of different, just diverse looks up front and a lot of different disruption to the opposition. And they just have not been able to recreate that. So that's got to be an offseason priority. But we're not talking about the offseason quite yet, John. The Bengals are 5-5. They host the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are still alive for the playoffs. And hey, if they beat the Steelers, I think they leapfrog them in the AFC North standings because the Steelers are 6-4. So that would help your playoff positioning here. What's your prediction for this one?
I'm going to go on a limb and say there are more points scored than people may think in this game. I don't know if it's going to get into the 30s necessarily, but I'm going to say it's orange and black. That's a pretty good combination. They rarely lose in that. Browning has the benefit of not having a lot of tape on him. The Steelers have the benefit of not having any tape on whatever this offense is going to be. I think both teams are going to kind of catch the other by surprise. And I think just like last year at Paycor Stadium, it's going to come down to a game-winning field goal. I think Evan McPherson makes one at the gun, 26-20.
Ooh, look at you. Yep. Look at you. Wow. Yeah. I actually am in a little bit of agreement about points scored. Now, I may eat that because we just talked all up and down about Pickett's 109, 106 passing yards last week, and a backup quarterback for the Bengals. But like you said, I think most teams, maybe this might be a game that they don't, they're not going to expect some of the things coming at them. Who knows about the boost with Canada being gone? So yeah, I mean, I think this might be a little bit more exciting than you think. Since you did it, I'll pick them too. I don't know how much I actually believe it, but I will say, I'll say 22-20 Bengals. What did you say? 26-21?
26-24.
26-24. Okay, I'll go a little lower. I'll do the Price is Right thing and go 22-20 and undercut you there. We'll see what happens, though. I mean, this could be. I honestly do not know what to expect out of this game. Have no idea what to expect out of this game. Total wild card anomaly of a game, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully, the Bengals at least make it fun. And like we said earlier, hopefully they kind of keep it competitive, keep the rest of the season competitive. I think that's what we want. I know higher draft picks are good in a lot of different things, but I think show some fight, get some wins, and maybe be in the conversation late and make yourself interesting. I think that's at a minimum what we would want as those who are fans and cover the team, etc. Let's get out of here. Let's drop the mic and get out of here on this precipice of a holiday. John, what do you got for us on our way out, buddy?
Well, to add on to that point, I think everyone can be on board with like the most optimal outcome of the season, which would be if you lose 5 games, it's perfectly fine. Beat the Steelers twice, I guess. I don't think that's going to be against anyone's wishes. Maybe that starts Sunday, but I think another positive out of Jake Browning just shining and exceeding everyone's expectations would be if we get to use his nickname in that case, Jakey Spin Rate. Jakey freaking Spin Rate. No wonder that was a secret for 2 years. It's terrible, but we're going to use it if he's good.
Yeah, I love it. And just a reminder. I think I had heard this, but kind of was reminded this week about Jonah Williams and Jake Browning being high school teammates, right? Yeah. So that's kind of cool. I didn't really connect all of that, but that's a pretty cool connection. And so at least there's, hopefully some chemistry or whatever you want to call it there going forward. Okay. Let's we'll get out of here. I got 2 things. One is a story. And so randomly for the first year, my oldest son, he's 6.5. I was never a basketball guy. I mean, I played and I would screw around with friends and whatever play, but I never played like in a league or anything like that. So I was never a basketball guy. So we signed my son's showing a lot of like, that's one of the sports he'll go out and play on his own. Like he'll just go shoot hoops in a hoop we have and all this kind of stuff. So long story short, we signed him up for this league and we are going to not be available for his very first practice next week. So there was this random, and it's kind of far from my house, especially with traffic. There was this random camp this week where, you could bring some canned goods and they donate that to a charity and stuff. So it's kind of a cool deal. And some of the coaches work him through drills for like an hour and a half and that sort of thing. I'm like, well, he's not getting his first practice. So I'd like to have him kind of be somewhat prepared. He's never played organized basketball before. So, okay, let's do it. So I go there. I'm like, oh man, I'm battling this. It's like almost an hour. And he's 6.5 sitting in the car getting antsy, the whole deal. And so I'm like, oh, why did we showed up a few minutes late. I'm like, why did we end up doing this? This is ridiculous. So he goes in there and I was going to go get my computer to do some work while I was watching him do his thing. And as I go out as I'm going out to my car, I see this guy. I'm like, that is TJ Hushmanzada. And he's walking into the gym. I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I went to get my computer and sure enough, he's there. The practice goes on. He's on an adjacent court. I was going to maybe say something. I wasn't going to wear a Bengals hat, by the way. I was kind of like, hey, I'm done wearing the Bengals stuff for a little while, but I happened to wear one that night. He saw me and at the end of the night and he's all, hey, with a big smile. And so anyway, we talked for about 5 minutes and stuff. And then I introduced my son to him and stuff. Incredibly cool guy. His family was there. And so I got to meet TJ Hushmanzada in person, which was cool. And it was super random. I don't know why. I don't know where he lives, but I just total random that he was there, but pretty cool deal. And of course, he was very nice to my son and I. So Hoosh, you're the man. As if you weren't already, you are the man. So that was pretty cool. And then just quickly to my youngest son, his birthday is tomorrow on Thanksgiving. So appropriate because he's the sweetest, coolest little dude. So happy birthday, Nixon.
Happy birthday, Nixon. Anthony sees more former and current Bengals players 3,000 miles away from Cincinnati than I do 20 miles
it's
away.
Weird, dude. It's weird. This is so for those, if you're familiar with Southern California, you probably know the city of Anaheim because that's where Disneyland is. So I live way further south from that. I live about 30 miles south, but traffic getting there, especially at 4:30, it's like an hour basically one way. And so I was like, what the hell am I doing? It's just battling this traffic. I'm just like, oh man, is this even worth it? And of course it's worth it for my son to develop his skills, but that was just an extra added icing on the cake there. It was pretty cool.
You got to give him a Hush jersey now. I mean, I'm sure they're on sale.
I should, yeah, probably should. And hopefully we can get DJ on the show at some point. I didn't plug the show. I didn't plug anything. I just, kind of said, hey, nice meeting you, etc. But kind of a fun story, cool story. Anyway, John, you have yourself a happy Thanksgiving, man. Enjoy your time with your friends and your family. All the listeners, thank you. All the listeners out there as well. Appreciate you. I know some of you may already be celebrating here. Like you said, what is it? Blackout Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. So yeah, you may be celebrating already, but appreciate those who tuned in live, those who tuned in after the fact. Take care, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Let's hope the Bengals, regardless of how the rest of the season goes, at least like John said, get those two against the Steelers. Take care, everybody.